When I finally found my husband, he wasn't where he said he'd be. He was on the porch of our dream house with another woman, holding the keys to the life he'd stolen. Mark and I had a 5-year plan. It was meticulously crafted, color-coded in a shared spreadsheet, and laminated in my mind. By 28, we'd have the down payment for our dream home, a charming little craftsman with a porch swing and a yard big enough for a golden retriever. We'd spend our weekends at Home Depot, arguing playfully over paint swatches and light fixtures. It was our gospel, the thing we worked toward every single day. We both poured our salaries into a joint savings account, the Dream House Fund, and watched the number climb with a shared sense of pride. It was more than a house. It was the foundation of the life we were building together. The first crack in that foundation appeared about 6 months ago. It was subtle, a hairline fracture I almost missed. The late nights at the office became more frequent. Mark was an architect at a prestigious firm, so long hours weren't unusual. But the pattern changed. Before, he'd come home exhausted but buzzing with creative energy, eager to show me blueprints and tell me about his projects. Now he'd come home smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine. His eyes distant and his phone glued to his palm, screen angled away from me. He'd blame it on a high-stress merger, a demanding new client. I, being the supportive wife, would nod, rub his shoulders and try to believe him. Then came the money issues. Our Dream House Fund, which had been growing at a steady, exciting pace, suddenly stagnated. When I brought it up, pointing to our spreadsheet, Mark got defensive. "The market's in a weird place, babe," he'd say, waving a dismissive hand. "My quarterly bonus was pushed back. We just need to be a little more frugal for a bit." Frugal? I was already packing my own lunches and cutting out my morning latte. I started looking at our joint account statements more closely, and that's when the real anxiety began to set in. There were withdrawals. Not huge, glaring ones, but a steady bleed. Hundreds here, 1,000 there. When I confronted him, he had a ready-made excuse for every single one. Investment opportunity, emergency loan for a buddy from college, advance payment for a work trip. Each lie was a paper cut, small and sharp, and they were starting to add up. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe that the man I'd married, the man whose future was so entwined with mine, wasn't systematically dismantling it behind my back. So I told myself I was being paranoid. I was letting the stress get to me. I needed to trust my husband. This mantra became a shield against the mounting evidence, a flimsy piece of cardboard I held up against a hailstorm. The breaking point was his leadership conference in Napa, a whole weekend. He packed his bag with an almost giddy excitement that seemed out of place for a work event. He kissed me goodbye at the door, a quick dry peck that felt more like an obligation than an act of affection. "I'll miss you," he said, but his eyes were already looking past me toward the waiting Uber. That weekend was torture. My texts would go unanswered for hours, and when he finally did reply, it would be a short, clipped message. "In a session, can't talk," or "Signal's bad up here." On Saturday night, I tried to video call him, just to see his face. He declined it instantly, texting back, "Sorry, team dinner, super loud." I sat on our couch, in the apartment that was supposed to be our last stop before the dream house, and a cold certainty settled in my gut. I was being played for a fool, but the extent of the game, the sheer audacity of it, was something my mind couldn't yet comprehend. Driven by a desperate, sickening need to know, I did something I'd never done before. I started digging. I wasn't a hacker. I was just a wife with a gut feeling and a shared password for our phone plan. I logged into our account, my hands shaking so badly I had to type the password 3 times. I looked at the call logs. The vast majority of his calls and texts for the last few months weren't to clients or his boss. They were to one number, a number I didn't recognize. My heart hammering against my ribs, I typed the number into a social media search bar. A profile popped up instantly, Chloe. Her profile picture was of her laughing, head thrown back, with an arm slung around her. It was Mark's arm. I knew the watch on his wrist, the cuff of his blue shirt. I felt the air leave my lungs in a ragged gasp. I clicked on her profile. It was public. And the very first post, uploaded just 2 hours ago, was a picture that shattered my world into a million irreparable pieces. It was Chloe and Mark, standing on the porch of a house, not just any house, a beautiful sage green craftsman with a wide porch and a perfectly manicured lawn. He was beaming, his arm wrapped tightly around her waist. She was dangling a set of shiny new keys from her index finger, her smile blindingly triumphant. They looked like a picture-perfect couple, celebrating the biggest purchase of their lives. And then I read the caption, and the last of the floor fell out from beneath me. "Making a new home for our new life," it read, followed by a string of nauseating hashtags. "So blessed to start this next chapter with the most amazing man in the world." It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just a weekend fling in Napa. He had taken our dream, the one built with my money, my sacrifices, and my love, and he had handed it to her, keys and all. He had bought a house with her behind my back. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The phone in my hand felt like a lead weight, the glowing screen a portal into a hell I hadn't known existed. The world narrowed to that single, sickeningly cheerful photo. The sage green siding, the white trim on the windows. It was the exact model we had bookmarked, the one we'd nicknamed the Forever House. He hadn't just stolen our money, he'd stolen our literal dream, pixel for pixel, and given it to someone else. My vision swam. I slid off the couch onto the floor, my breath coming in ragged, silent sobs. The laminated 5-year plan felt like a cruel joke, a souvenir from a life that was now officially over. The grief lasted for exactly 10 minutes. Then something else kicked in, a cold, crystalline rage that burned away the tears and sharpened my focus. The shock subsided and was replaced by a chilling clarity. He thought he was smart. He thought he could drain our future, build a new one with her, and leave me with the empty apartment and a spreadsheet of broken promises. He thought I was the sweet, trusting, supportive wife who would crumble. He was wrong. I stood up, my legs still shaky, and walked to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water, my hand steady now. As I drank, I looked around the apartment we had shared, the life we had built. It was all a lie. And for a lie this monumental, there had to be consequences. My first move was to become an intelligence agent in my own home. I screenshotted the Instagram post from every conceivable angle. I screenshotted Chloe's profile, her friends list, every photo she'd ever been tagged in with my husband. I created a new encrypted folder on my laptop and saved everything. Then I went through our bank statements again, this time with the cold, hard knowledge of what I was looking for. The withdrawals weren't random anymore. They formed a pattern, a clear timeline. The large transfer labeled investment a month ago perfectly matched the typical 20% down payment for a house in that specific suburb. The smaller withdrawals were for inspections, application fees, closing costs. It was all there, a financial confession written in black and white. He had been liquidating our future for months. By the time I heard his key in the lock on Sunday evening, I was a different woman. The heartbroken wife was gone, replaced by an actress worthy of an Oscar. I had showered, changed into his favorite sweater, and was just pulling a lasagna out of the oven, the smell of domestic bliss filling the air. He walked in, dropping his weekend bag with a theatrical sigh of exhaustion. "Hey, babe," he said, forcing a weary smile. "God, I am beat. These conferences are brutal." I turned, giving him my best bright, welcoming smile. "Hey, honey, welcome home. I missed you. How was it? Did you learn a lot?" My voice was light, airy, not a tremor of the fury churning in my stomach. He walked over and kissed my forehead. His lips felt like ice. So boring. You know, just PowerPoints and trust falls. He was a terrible liar. He handed me a bottle of wine, a cheap Merlot, the kind they sell at gas stations. The label had a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge on it, as if to prove its Napa authenticity. "Brought you this," he said, puffing out his chest slightly. I wanted to smash it over his head. Instead, I cooed, "Oh, honey, you shouldn't have. I'll open it for dinner." We ate dinner like strangers performing a play about a happy couple. I asked him questions about his sessions, and he spun a web of vague, corporate-sounding lies. I nodded and smiled, my mind a million miles away, replaying the photo of him and Chloe, picturing them laughing in my kitchen on my porch. After dinner, he said he was going to take a long, hot shower to de-stress. "Great idea, honey. You deserve it," I said, starting to clear the plates. The moment I heard the water start, I sprang into action. His weekend bag was on the floor in the bedroom. I unzipped it silently. Dirty clothes, a cheap hotel notepad. Nothing. Then I saw his briefcase, the one he never let out of his sight, sitting by his side of the bed. It was usually locked, but in his post-coital, new house-owning bliss, he'd forgotten. The latches clicked open with a sound that was deafening in the quiet apartment. Inside, beneath a stack of architectural drawings for a project I knew was real, was a slim manila folder. My heart was a drum against my ribs as I lifted it out. My hands didn't even shake as I opened it. Inside was a stack of official-looking documents, a preliminary title report, a loan estimate, and there, on top, was a copy of the grant deed. I scanned it, my eyes devouring the text. There was the address, confirming the location. There was the purchase price, a number that made me physically ill, confirming he'd drained our entire dream house fund and then some. My eyes flew to the section labeled Grantee. This was it, the final, irrefutable proof. I expected to see his name and hers, a final twist of the knife, but her name wasn't there. There was only one, Mark T. Collins, a married man as his sole and separate property. A wave of confusion washed over me, quickly followed by a slow, creeping, euphoric realization. He did it. The arrogant, cheating fool actually did it. He had the audacity to use our joint marital funds to buy a house during our marriage and then try to declare it on a legal document as his sole and separate property. He thought that little phrase, those 7 words, would protect his new life from me. He thought he could just write me out of the equation. He forgot where we lived. He forgot that in our state, the law has a very different opinion. He forgot that community property isn't just a suggestion. It's a rule. And he had just handed me a notarized, government-filed confession of his attempt to defraud me. A cold smile spread across my face. This wasn't just a betrayal anymore. It was a gift. I carefully slid the documents back into the folder, placed it precisely where I'd found it in his briefcase, and snapped the latches shut. The sound echoed in the silent room, a punctuation mark on the end of my old life and the beginning of my new one. I walked back into the living room just as the shower turned off, my face a perfect mask of serene domesticity. The rage was still there, a pilot light burning deep inside, but it was now a controlled, focused energy. This wasn't a time for screaming or throwing plates. This was a time for strategy. He thought this was a game of hearts. He didn't realize I was playing chess. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was the doting wife, packing his lunches, asking about his work, rubbing his shoulders when he came home, stressed. I listened to his fabricated stories about his demanding client, the one that required him to work late and take hushed phone calls in the other room. Each lie he told, I mentally cataloged, filing it away with the mounting evidence. He was so smug, so confident in my ignorance, that he became sloppy. He'd leave his phone face up on the coffee table, and I'd see texts from Chloe pop up, which he'd quickly snatch away with a muttered, "Ugh, work." He started talking more about the future, but it was a vague, hollow version of our old plan. "Soon, babe, we'll get that house," he'd say, patting my hand without meeting my eyes. "Just a few more hurdles at the firm." I would just smile and say, "I know, honey, I trust you." Meanwhile, the other me, the woman he didn't know existed, was a machine. I spent my lunch breaks not with coworkers, but in a quiet corner of the library, devouring every article and legal statute I could find on community property law in our state. The language was dense, but the core principle was beautifully simple. Anything acquired during the marriage, from a paycheck to a Powerball ticket to a sage green Craftsman house, was considered 50-50 property of the marital community. His attempt to title the deed as sole and separate property using our joint funds was, in legal terms, presumptively void. It was a fraudulent transfer. He might as well have signed a confession on the deed itself. My next step was finding a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but the sharpest, most ruthless family law attorney I could find. After hours of research, I found her. Veronica the Shark Davies. Her website was filled with testimonials from women who had been in situations just like mine, and they all sang the praises of her ferocity and meticulous attention to detail. I booked a consultation, paying the fee with my own personal credit card, the one he didn't know about. Sitting in her sleek, minimalist office, I laid out my story. I didn't cry, I didn't get hysterical. I calmly presented my evidence. The screenshots, the annotated bank statements, and the photo of the grant deed I had taken with my phone that night. Veronica listened intently, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she leaned back in her high-backed leather chair, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. "Mr. Collins," she said, her voice a low purr, "has made what we in the business call a catastrophic error. He hasn't just cheated on you, Mrs. Collins. He's committed fraud, and he's documented it beautifully." She explained the legal path forward, the motions we would file, the ex parte orders we could request. She told me that not only was I entitled to 50% of the house, but given the deliberate, deceptive nature of his actions, the legal term was breach of fiduciary duty. A judge would likely award me more than 50% of the asset he tried to hide, plus my attorney's fees. Music to my ears. I walked out of her office feeling 10 feet tall. The plan was set. Veronica would prepare the filings, but we would wait for the perfect moment to strike. "Let him get comfortable," she had advised. "Let him move her in. Let them hang pictures. The more settled they feel, the more spectacular the fall." So I waited. I watched him shuttle boxes out of our apartment, claiming he was storing old project files at a new off-site facility. I saw new charges on our credit card, which was, of course, a joint community card from Crate and Barrel, Pottery Barn, West Elm. They were furnishing my house with my money. The audacity was breathtaking, but every receipt was another nail in his coffin. The perfect moment arrived on a Thursday evening, about a month after his Napa conference. He came home from work whistling. It was the most disgustingly cheerful sound I'd ever heard. "Big news, babe," he announced, his eyes shining with a false excitement. "The partners are so impressed with my work on the merger that they're sending me to an international symposium in Singapore for a whole week." He was practically vibrating with joy. This was it. This was the cover story for him to officially move in with her. He was going to pack his bags, tell me he was flying to Asia, and then simply drive across town to his new life in my dream house. "Oh, Mark, that's amazing," I gushed, wrapping my arms around his neck. "I am so proud of you. When do you leave?" "First thing Saturday morning," he said, hugging me back. "It's a long flight, you know. I'll have to pack tomorrow night." "Of course," I said, pulling away, my sweetest smile firmly in place. "You just focus on getting ready for your big trip. I'll handle everything here." He looked at me, a flicker of something guilt, relief, in his eyes. He had no idea what I was about to handle. I knew with absolute certainty that he had no intention of ever coming back. He planned to send me a text from Singapore next week telling me it was over. He was going to ghost his own wife. Friday night came. He packed his largest suitcase, filling it with his best suits, his favorite shoes, all the things he would need to start his new life. He was meticulous, making sure he didn't forget anything important. He thought he was preparing for a new beginning. He had no idea he was packing for his own eviction. Saturday morning was a cinematic masterpiece of deception. I woke up early, made him a special bon voyage breakfast of pancakes and freshly squeezed orange juice, and bustled around him like the perfect supportive wife. I helped him carry his oversized suitcase to the door, stood on my tiptoes to give him a long, lingering kiss, and whispered, "Have a safe flight, honey. Text me when you land." He held me for a moment, and for a split second I saw a flicker of genuine conflict in his eyes. It wasn't enough. It was a dying ember where a bonfire of love and commitment should have been. "I will," he promised, his voice a little tight. "I'll miss you, Allie." He turned and walked away, not once looking back. He got into a taxi, not an Uber to the airport, I noted, but a local cab, and disappeared around the corner. The door clicked shut and the silence in the apartment was deafening. I counted to 60, then I allowed myself one final, bone-deep shudder of grief for the man I thought I had married. Then I picked up my phone. My first call was to Veronica. "He's gone," I said. "It's time." The next few hours were a blur of coordinated action. Veronica had already filed the ex parte emergency petitions the day before, timed perfectly for the Friday afternoon document dump at the courthouse. By 9 a.m. on Saturday, a process server was dispatched. My second call was to two of my closest friends, Lisa and Ben, the only people I had confided in. They arrived 20 minutes later with cardboard boxes, packing tape, and 2 large coffees for me. We worked with grim efficiency, a silent, determined team. We packed all of Mark's belongings, every shirt, every book, every last sock. We were careful not to damage anything, just to methodically erase him from the space we had once shared. It was a cleansing ritual, each sealed box a step toward my new reality. By noon, his entire existence in the apartment was condensed into a neat stack of brown boxes by the door. My third and final call was to a locksmith. As my friends carried the last box out to my car, the locksmith arrived and changed the locks on the front door. He handed me the new set of keys, and the cool metal in my palm felt like a symbol of my reclaimed independence. The apartment was mine. The locks were new. The next phase of the plan was about to begin. Veronica had explained the legal magic she had worked. We had filed for divorce on grounds of fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. We'd also filed for an emergency kick-out order, legally known as a dwelling exclusion order, and a motion for exclusive use and possession of the Sage Green Craftsman House. Given the irrefutable evidence that Mark had fraudulently used community funds to acquire the property and was now cohabitating with his mistress there, the judge had signed off on everything without hesitation. The signed court order in my purse gave me temporary sole possession of the house and everything in it. It also ordered Mark to vacate the premises immediately and stay 100 yards away from the property. He wasn't just losing a girlfriend, he was being legally evicted from the dream he had stolen. At 2 p.m., I drove to the address on the deed. My heart was a frantic bird in my chest, but my hands were steady on the wheel. This was it. I parked a block away and walked toward the house, my house. It was even more beautiful in person. They had already put a wicker porch swing up, a cruel parody of my own dream. I could see them through the large front window, Chloe and Mark, laughing as they tried to assemble a bookshelf. The sight sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated fury through me. I took a deep breath, walked up the stone pathway, and rang the doorbell. The door swung open, and there she was. Chloe. She was younger than me, with bright, artificially blonde hair and a smug smile that faltered the moment she saw my face. Confusion flickered in her eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone laced with suspicion. Before I could answer, Mark appeared behind her, a drill in his hand. "Who is it, babe?" he started to ask, and then he saw me. All the color drained from his face. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked from me to the taxi he thought had taken him to the airport, to the life he thought he'd left behind, and the gears in his arrogant brain started to grind, realizing the terrible, impossible truth. "Allie," he finally croaked, his voice a strangled whisper. "What What are you doing here?" I gave him a smile, a slow, cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I could ask you the same thing, Mark," I said, my voice calm and even. I held up the crisp, legally binding court order. "But I suppose the more important question is, what are you doing in my house?" Chloe looked from the paper in my hand to Mark's ashen face, her own expression clouding with dawning horror. "Your house?" she scoffed, a nervous tremor in her voice. "What is she talking about, Mark? Who is this?" I didn't wait for his pathetic attempt at an explanation. I took a step forward, crossing the threshold. "I'm his wife," I said, my gaze locked on Chloe's. "And according to this court order, you have exactly 30 minutes to gather your personal belongings and vacate my property before I have you both removed for trespassing." The silence that followed my announcement was thick enough to choke on. Mark stood frozen, a statue of disbelief, the cordless drill hanging uselessly from his hand. Chloe's face went through a rapid series of emotions: confusion, indignation, panic, and finally, a dawning, ugly realization. Her eyes darted between me, the court order in my hand, and Mark's terrified expression. "Wife?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Mark, what the hell is she talking about? You told me you were divorced." Mark finally snapped out of his trance, but only to stammer. "Allie, honey, there's a misunderstanding. This is crazy. We can talk about this." He took a step toward me, his hand outstretched in a placating gesture. I didn't flinch. I just held up the court order like a shield. "There's nothing to talk about," I said, my voice as cold as the legal ink on the page. "And don't call me honey. The man standing next to you used our joint marital savings money I earned, money I saved for our in future to buy this house with you. He committed fraud, and I have the paperwork to prove it. The court agrees with me." I shifted my gaze to Chloe. "As for you, I'd start packing. The clock is ticking. You can leave your little IKEA project, though. I think a bookshelf will look lovely right there." That's when the chaos erupted. Chloe turned on Mark, her voice a furious hiss. "You lied to me. You told me she was your crazy ex. You used my money, too." So he'd been playing both of us. A part of me almost felt a sliver of pity for her. Almost. While they began a screaming match right there in the foyer, I calmly walked past them into the living room. It was surreal. They had bought the exact couch we had bookmarked, the same coffee table. It was my dream house furnished for his affair. The process server had arrived as planned, a large, impassive man who now stood in the doorway, along with 2 uniformed police officers I had arranged to have on standby just in case. Their presence immediately silenced the argument. "You have 25 minutes, the officer said in a bored, authoritative voice, gesturing for Chloe to start moving. Reality finally crashed down on her. With a sob of fury, she ran upstairs. Mark just stared at me, his face a mask of utter defeat. "Allie, please," he begged, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "Don't do this. I'll give it back. I'll do anything." I just looked at him, the man I had once loved with my entire being, and felt nothing but a cold, hard emptiness where that love used to be. "You already did this, Mark," I replied quietly. "You made your choice. Now you get to live with it. Get your things." The next 20 minutes were a pathetic spectacle. Chloe frantically threw her clothes and makeup into duffel bags, sobbing and cursing Mark the entire time. Mark, looking completely broken, numbly packed a single box with a few personal items, a laptop, some papers, a framed photo from his desk that, I noticed with a grim satisfaction, was of the 2 of them. It was a pitifully small collection to show for the life he had tried to build. As the officers escorted them to the door, Chloe shot me a look of pure venom. "You'll regret this, you bitch." I just smiled serenely. "I don't think I will." Mark was the last to leave. He paused on the porch, my porch, and looked back at me. He looked small and pathetic. "I loved you," he said, the words sounding hollow and false. "You had a funny way of showing it," I replied, and gently closed the door in his face. I leaned against it, the solid wood a barrier between my past and my future, and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for months. I was alone, in a house that should have been our dream, but was now my sanctuary. The legal battle that followed was brutal, but swift. Mark's case was hopeless, and he knew it. Veronica was, as promised, a shark. The grant deed was our smoking gun. Faced with overwhelming evidence of fraud and a breach of fiduciary duty, Mark's attorney quickly advised him to settle. In the end, the judge's ruling was more satisfying than I could have imagined. I was awarded the house, free and clear, as my sole and separate property. Due to the malicious nature of his fraud, I was also awarded 70% of all our other liquid community assets, including his 401k. To top it all off, he was ordered to pay my entire legal bill. He had tried to steal my dream, and in the end, he had lost everything and ended up paying for my victory. I sold the sage green craftsman house. As beautiful as it was tainted. I couldn't live there without seeing the ghosts of his betrayal. The sale closed quickly in a hot market, and the profit was substantial. With that money and the rest of my settlement, I put a down payment on a different house. A sunny little bungalow with a lemon tree in the backyard, closer to my friends and my job. It wasn't the house from our 5-year plan. It was better. It was my house, bought with my money, on my terms. The first thing I bought for it was a porch swing, and I spent the first evening in my new home sitting on it, sipping a glass of expensive wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. There was no color-coded spreadsheet, no meticulously crafted plan. There was just me, a feeling of profound peace, and the quiet, exhilarating promise of a future that was entirely my own.